Welcome back. For the last decade, Donald Trump has drastically reshaped the Republican Party and reshaped American politics altogether. In his upcoming new book, Trump's 10 Commandments, Jeffrey Sonnenfeld, a Yale University scholar and informal advisor to 5 U.S. presidents, outlines the 10 principles that have defined the Trump era of politics. Jeffrey Sonnenfeld joins me now. Jeffrey, thank you so much for being here to talk about the book. And I want to start first with your relationship to the president. How did you come to know Donald Trump?
Well, it's an interesting story. Back when Jeff Zucker was running this great enterprise, he was running NBC Universal. He asked if I would write a review each week for the first episode, the first issues, the first season of The Apprentice, and I would go in the Wall Street Journal. So he would get them to me a day in advance, and he thought to be positive messages, but I looked at them; they were unbelievable. As I referred to it as, the elimination game premise. That it was sort of like a musical chairs game at a Hooters restaurant with the sexist overview that it had, because the outtakes are pretty scary. That nothing that Access Hollywood needed to discover later when you see these things. And so, if you can believe it, he's a little sensitive to criticism, and he was a little threatening. After the first review, where it was labeled "Last Emperor Trump," and I predicted he would run for president. This is 2004, he said, well, to Zucker and NBC and Wall Street Journal, tear it up. And the Wall Street Journal said, no, we can set traffic out of this. Let them see next week. So I said, I'm not going to recant. They said, yeah, you have to rescind. So I looked at it and said, Mr. Trump asked if I would rescind it. And I do. I thought I wouldn't. Last week I said that was the worst possible portrait of business leadership on television I could imagine for young people to follow. But I hadn't seen this week's. And we wound up actually ultimately becoming friends as he got pretty threatening. We'd go on the Today Show. We'd go on to the old Kudlow and Kramer show and your old shows from the old sisters at CNBC and things. And he and I would wind up in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, or in Sao Paulo, Brazil, in battles. And he wasn't taking well to it. So he called and said, let's get together for golf. I'm a horrible golfer. But as we got together for lunch, he offered me the presidency of Trump University. I said, no, I don't think so. But he was trying to replace the squeaky wheel, actually drown it in oil rather than replace me. And we wound up becoming friends because I suggested what became the Celebrity Apprentice. I said the trouble is getting these engaging young millennials and putting them in this zero-sum, throw them off the island setting. And he said, well, that's the premise that Jack Welch, who GE owned NBC at the time, wanted us to steal from Survivor from CBS, and that was Mark Burnett, the producer. So we just stole Mark Burnett to produce the same show in a business setting. I said, well, you got nobody to lead if you're throwing them all off the island, if you kill off your own people. So, but he understood that, and I said, go for these fallen celebrities. I never loved ethnic humor. And he said, let's do it. So he moved it to the Celebrity Apprentice, and we became friends after that, although I disagree with him about at least 2/3 of the time.
So you have studied Donald Trump, the businessman, and now Donald Trump, the president, in terms of some of his strategies, how he approaches leadership. And let's talk about one of the tenets that you write about in the book, specifically something called the sleeper effect, which you write is when someone states falsehoods with unwavering confidence, people begin to think, maybe there's something I've missed. This is precisely how the sleeper effect works. You write, the messenger's confidence becomes more memorable than the message's accuracy. When have we seen him embrace this?
You really studied this well. You do not have to take the final exam. You're all set. You've mastered it. That's exactly right. It's a scary thing. It was studied at Yale in the 1940s and 50s based on what was happening in Germany in the 1930s. And the work was really controversial. The sleeper effect basically says for a sophisticated audience, and it sounds really class conscious, you tell them both sides of the story, but implant some fatal flaws in it. Unsophisticated, just tell them one side, and both times just keep pounding away. And no matter who comes along to correct the source, like you have source corrections out there, these Pointer Institutes or fact check places, NewsGuard or things, people don't care about that because they see that the message lingers on the memory curve. It lingers, so you can still, if you keep repeating the message, you can get maybe 20–25% of Americans to believe that Haitian refugees are eating their neighbors' pets, even though it's denied by everybody.
Have you seen him employ that when he's discussing the war against Iran?
Yes, actually, what's interesting on that one, he's not sure what message he wants. Just in the course of the last 48 hours, we happen to have President Herzog and the chief of strategy for the Israeli Defense Forces and the chief of information officer, as well as Prime Minister Theresa May and others, some U.S. generals, and they all said, basically, what's the strategy here? He told us that the nuclear capabilities had been defanged, and now he's saying he wants to make it inoperable. But wait a second, I thought it's where we were 8 months ago, 10 months ago, and then he's shifted to say that we've accomplished about 80% of what we want. Then he said we've not yet begun the fight. So it's confusing, but he needs to have a consistent message, and he usually does that. But right now he's shopping messages to find out what works, and that's what he also does. There's a lot of trial balloons, and then once he sees what seems to be working. Similarly, with Venezuela, he went through a whole litany of alternatives. He suggested we were going to Venezuela for drug interdiction, but when it turned out that he had just freed 1 month earlier the former president of Honduras, President Hernandez, who hadn't just been extradited, but indicted by a jury and then convicted by another jury and sentenced for 45 years. And then he pardoned him. And that guy actually had proven links to massive drug trafficking into the U.S., whereas the Venezuela case wasn't so strong, that didn't hold up. So he switched. And he said, well, let me try and say that it's Russian and Chinese ships. And that didn't work. So then he shifted to say, well, the oil industry put me up to it. It was at the behest. And I called the leaders of the oil industry. They said, no, we have no interest in that sour, heavy crude Venezuelan oil, and it's too expensive to extract it there.
Have you noticed any changes or evolutions from his first term to his second term in how he uses these commandments, as you call them? Yeah,
when he went in, I don't think he thought he was necessarily going to win. He kept calling me in 2015 asking if he should run. And I told him that I thought that if he wants the attention, he could do it, that he'll get 15 to 18%, as Ross Perot did previously as a business leader with no background in government, and he'll crest there. And he said, great, that's what Melania says. She says I should run too. I said, wait, I didn't say you should run. I said just, but so he did. And he wound up with an inelegant moment, I believe it was in New Hampshire, where somebody had a hostile, bigoted statement about Muslims. And I told him afterwards, you know, you missed your McCain moment where John McCain as a candidate corrected somebody for attacking Barack Obama on similar terms, and he's not Muslim, but even if he were. But that was the wrong thing to say, because he hated John McCain because McCain stood up to him. And he said, well, I never said it. But he had a confidence issue back then. And he also put together what he thought was a marquee cabinet. They weren't, but they were people who were grounded in the legitimacy of their fields. They had authority, they had knowledge. Now he has sycophants, or if we weren't on television, I would say suck-ups, and people who have a filial piety back to him. They're beholden to him, and that's a problem because he has no guardrails now. So he keeps pushing and pushing and pushing to see how far he can go, and he wouldn't mind it if somebody pushes back. For example, when we saw the community of Minneapolis, including 60 major business leaders, the CEOs of Target and Medtronic and Cargill, and 60 of them, along with the clergy and, of course, massive street demonstrations, he moved away. The way you counter a bully, which is another point in here in this book, is through basic collective action, is another one of his lessons, is always to divide and conquer. He hates NAFTA. Then USMCA that he created. He hated that too, trying to constantly start fights between Mexico and Canada. He doesn't like NATO, which is to try to stir things up in the EU. And he feels that he's better off if he has people that are constantly at war with each other, and they're not a threat to him. In Trump 1.0, he had delegated a lot of power to people that also had authority. They were known in their fields of expertise in diplomacy or law enforcement or science, whatever it was. And he didn't like that. So now it's like a hub, like a solar system, or a wheel with a hub with spokes coming off of it. Everything goes through him. In Trump 1.0, it wasn't so centralized. So there, for the price of nothing, your viewers just got 3 of the 10 chapters.
Jeffrey Sonnenfeld, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.